when a 5-year-old, Bella, suffered from devastating epileptic seizures. Her parents tried pharmaceutical drugs, but the drugs doped little Bella up like a vegetable on the couch. She was not living a child's life at all, or any kind of life, said Craig, Bella's dad. Thanks to the medical cannabis product, CBD, hemp oil, beautiful Bella is smiling and playing at the park. Bella was born with hydrocephalus, a condition that causes excessive fluid in the brain. Doctors don't expect Bella to walk and talk, but as you can see, they were wrong. In June 2013, when Bella was 2 years old, she had her first seizure. It was any parent's nightmare. Bella's mom, Erin, found her unresponsive, like a crumpled up piece of paper on the floor, a puddle of saliva near her mouth. Bella was rushed to the emergency care. Erin said they had her in the trauma unit, and she was violently seizing like nothing I'd ever seen before in my life. She couldn't bear to see her daughter like that, and fell to the floor. I thought she was dying, Craig said. Seizures, emergencies, are terrifying for children and their family, even when treated. The Epilepsy Foundation says seizures can make it difficult for kids to do well in school, can cause depression and anxiety, and can lead to unexplained injuries and illnesses. Gina was a lead emergency room nurse at the hospital when Bella was rushed in with her father, Craig. She grabbed an IV to help Bella, who was severely dehydrated, and was able to stick it through, even though it was a little tricky. She immediately bonded with the family. From that moment, I met Aaron, Craig, and the little girl. I felt like I became part of their family. They call me Bella's one-stick trick, she said. Bella is a really special kid. She is sassy, little beauty. She's smart as a whip and tough as nails. Pharmaceuticals took away the similar joys of childhood. Bella was nodding out on the couch. Aaron and Craig wanted nothing more than their baby girl, to be able to play, to laugh, and enjoy her childhood. Then one of Bella's epilepsy drugs caused anaphylactic, an intense allergic reaction that nearly killed her. She almost died in the ambulance ride, her father said. The couple turned to Real Scientific hemp oil, a highly concentrated hemp oil produced by hemp meds. Her parents say that Bella takes 2 millimeters per day, sometimes with a scoop of ice cream. Within the first month, it was a lot of positive change, Craig said. Suddenly, Bella could play or could power through each day like a champ and had notable improvements at school. She can smile in the sunshine and enjoy all the family fun. Bella's nurse said she was able to function again. Her personality was beginning to shine through again. It really was pretty amazing. It was also amazing to see her neurological team embrace the fact that this treatment was working. And I remember the hospital even allowing us to bring her CBD oil in so that the nurses on the admitting units could administer her the oil as a non-formulary medication. Later on, the family involved a fundraiser to help the family get CBD oil for Bella. Indiana recently approved a measure to help kids like Bella by allowing the use of CBD hemp oil to treat seizures. I feel that we have pretty concrete evidence that hemp oil has helped her, said Aaron. Craig said Bella can play with all the other children again. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing. She's a child now, said her father. Just as you can see Bella's genuine smile for yourself, you can help by sharing this story. And that's where the intro music is supposed to come in, folks. So,
well, we've got a meltdown here. Everything's going through our new USB routing system. I'm guessing we're having some technical difficulties. New equipment warning here.
Anyway, so I wanted to start out with a story. One that allowed you to understand why we chose the topics that we chose tonight.
And it kind of, it's a warm and fuzzy one. Like, it's kind of a happy story. Like, we don't have to be doom and gloom. That's a good story.
But the reason behind the story is because there's a recent attack in Michigan. And I'm going to call it an attack. And maybe it's just because I've been on, a little bit of an affront lately. I've had to deal quite a bit with, people and the Antifa and the Nazis and everybody yelling at everybody else. And I just don't understand why we can't just attack Nazis. But that's not part of the show tonight. The part of the show tonight is the fact that in Michigan, dispensaries are under attack by Republicans. And I don't say that lightly, and I say that because who runs the state, right? Who runs the state?
Who runs most states right now, thanks to the last midterm election, and none of the progressives or liberals or young people went out and voted in.
Exactly. And so, in all fairness here, I agree. We have states that are run by, Republicans. And so what's happening now in Michigan, and last week the story broke, is that there is going to be a vote, right? By the state, by the board members of I will call it the Medical Marijuana Licensing Board. Mm-hmm. And essentially they want to shut down dispensaries by September 5th. They would not allow them to reopen until after the state has issued licensing. Essentially, they claim every dispensary out there is in open violation of the Medical Marijuana Act. Essentially, a board member said during an afternoon that they met last week on the 21st. He says it's a felony for every sale that occurs at a dispensary.
Well, yeah, technically, according to national law, all of these marijuana sales and everything is a felony because it's still considered a Class 1 drug. There's a big pile of ridiculousness that happened here that everybody in the Republican Party really loves to say that we want to give the states the rights. We don't want this big centralized government. And then as soon as the states decide that they want, hey, this is kind of okay, then they say, no, we can't have that. That's not allowed because you guys don't know what you're doing. And this is a moral affront to, good American sensibilities or whatever it is. It's just another section of hypocrisy that we see from specifically the Michigan legislature in this situation.
Exactly. And so, the problem here, right, is that what they want to do is they want to actually shut these dispensaries down. And by trying to shut the dispensaries down, what they're going to do is they're going to restrict people from actually being able to get medicalized marijuana. Now,
so all the people that need it while they're shut down won't have access. That's kind of your goal?
That's not my goal.
No, well, that's the goal of your point is basically what they're saying.
Yes, and so essentially when they start shutting them down, they're going to basically not be able to ever have or purchase marijuana at these dispensaries. Now, some people will go, okay, well, how is that a big deal, right? They can get it illegally. They can get it from other sources. And what about if these dispensaries just turn to the black market? Well, the whole point of medicalized marijuana was to help bring it out of the dark ages. It was help bring people into the light so that they didn't have to go through these backdoor alleys. And
become opiate addicts like everyone else is in this country right now.
And the best part about this is not the fact that, I'm sitting here saying, oh no, marijuana is going to be restricted to all these other people that, may or may not need it. The case that we just talked about, in that case, in this state, if that had happened, that little girl would not be able to legally get it. And we're talking, this is CBD oil. That's not even THC. That's a whole different chemical compound. And if you go back a year and a half, we actually analyzed the difference between the two and talked about scientific studies and where they're at. And while scientific studies don't support what that family is experiencing because it has not been tested yet, it doesn't mean we should go take away people's access just because we want to try and now be legal and above board. And that's what the problem is. That's the problem here.
It's the cold turkey here. Is you're going to leave a lot of people out to dry who really do need some of this pain medication help, or like this girl, which is just essentially the only thing they've been able to find to help her function in society. What does she know about, this is the only thing that she could find. Why should we punish her because of arguments that adults are having about whether or not marijuana is a Schedule 1 horrifying, detriment to society? Well, it has medical purposes. This very specific girl is a very specific case and where this could be, a good thing. I would love to see these people look at her in the face and say, sorry, we don't care. that you're up and moving around and living comfortably. We are taking this away because it is just an inherent bad thing for you. So
exactly, and that's the problem. So what they're going to do is so here we could talk a little bit about this. They're saying they want to address the confusion, Hannah. That's what they're claiming. They say we want to address the confusion that the legislative organization in the government passed last year to regulate and tax the medical marijuana business. The new legislation will allow for 5 different classes of medical marijuana licenses: those for growers, processors, testing facilities, dispensaries, and transporters. The legislation also calls for 3 classes of marijuana growers: one who can grow up to 500 plants, one up to 1,000, and one up to 1,500. Now, I'll be perfectly honest, I'm not actually 100% against creating laws and regulations per se for what's going on in Michigan.
Yeah.
I agree that we should be taxing this in some aspects. I know from experience, how much it roughly costs, on a grow operation. I know where that bubble is. So if you're only growing 3 or 4 plants and you've only got a few people, your costs are higher than if you're, selling to a larger range of people. But once you hit a certain peak, it doesn't get that much cheaper because of the electricity costs, the water costs, and, all your chemical costs, right?
Well, these are all the kinds of things that would be in a legitimate small business. I mean, these are just, you're in a growing operation. So translate that over to some kind of, produce operation where you're doing something like growing food in the city where you don't have access to large spaces of land, so they do internal grows and all. There's all kinds of stuff that are similarities here. They could use for comparisons for all of that, like growing in like vegetables and other greens on rooftops, for example.
Exactly, and so I'm not against looking at the legislation. What I'm against and what I'm having a hard time understanding is why we're going to allow them to just shut dispensaries down. Why should that be able to happen? Why can all of a sudden we go ahead and shut dispensaries down and, not have to worry about all the patients that are on there, right?
Well, what do you think they want to just automatically slam it down? Because I have a theory, basically, it's an economic one. But do you have any idea as to why they want to just hammer it off, even though they're going to be starting it up soon?
Well, what they claim is that there's too many people operating these things illegally, and we need to get people in legal operating, in a sense, right? And so one of the arguments that was used was that, hey, I'm in a county where there's 67 other people that can grow, therefore, I'm being discriminated against in essence because I'm not going to be able to get a license and just be able to be one of the privileged people to grow. And so that's one of the arguments. One of the other arguments, that kind of came up was, well, hey, this is all 100% illegal, right? And until the federal government comes in and does something, we should just make our own decisions. And we're going to just let all the cities and townships make the decisions, and not all the communities have had their say in whether they want grow operations in their townships or cities. So those are the 2 main arguments that I've gotten out of this.
For me, it's basically an economic one. So there are distribution routes set out all over the state because of this kind of sort of soft start that we had when it was just relatively legalized and for medical purposes, obviously. And what we have is just kind of this grassroots, homegrown type thing where these things have just kind of organically created these distribution networks. And what they want, the typical thing that you see when you see business people, when you see people who have establishment all over and other businesses, they want to get in and they want to control this. They want to use their financial strengths. So they're in government. They've got lobbying and, or they have connections to pharmaceutical industry, and they want to get this industry and this distribution stuff into their networks. And so they will be trying to shut down all of these homegrown organic ones, put a whole bunch of licenses and restrictions to get it in the people who are, let's say, fortunate enough or privileged enough to be able to finance and cover and maybe a little bit better at creating business plans and legitimate on-paper businesses. And so they would be a little bit better and a little bit easier to get these types of distribution licenses and everything. And so what it's doing is going to cut out a lot of these organic small growers who are kind of taking advantage of the laissez-faire, the laid-back way everything's going. And then what they'll do is they get this sterilized version of the market where a few business people, business-savvy people with a lot of investors will probably come away with most of this control. And that's what I've heard and what I've kind of seen is what's going to happen. Because think about it, the mom and pop shops, those guys are going to be immediately attacked as soon as any big business gets into this, once the licensing and everything is there, and these people have lawyers who specify in getting all their certifications and paperwork in order. I mean, it's going to enter into, what we call the corporate sector, and it'll change everything, and we'll see expensive prices and things like that. That's my opinion of what the shutdown, so they can restart it the way they want it, as opposed to kind of letting it stay the way it is now.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it allows them to control things that I don't know if they should. I mean, I don't disagree that they could control things. I mean, I don't want to sound libertarian here and be like, well, on one side, we should just allow, for no rules and everybody can buy what they want. And on the other side, I don't want to go so pro-state that they're allowed to retake control to make a capital gain out of this. And I agree that we should be able to profit off this. And I believe the government should be able to profit off this through taxation as well. But I don't feel that it's going to be super fair if in the long run of things we allow, a completely unregulated market, or if we completely allow for the state to turn around and say, no, we're going to specifically pick.
I just want equal access to all of these kinds of things so that the guy with 10 grand also has the same opportunity to build a small business as the guy who has $10 million. You know what I mean? Like, a rich guy is going to be able to in there and buy a whole bunch of stuff and just be through the bullying method, push people out. Like Walmart comes into your town and kicks out all the small mom and pop shops. Like, I think that would happen to marijuana. And if some people, investors, that, hey, this is, a legal thing. I can get into this and not worry about getting arrested by the feds. I'm going to put a bunch of money in here because this is a huge cash crop. We can make a ton of money here. I just see that. I distrust that kind of thing so I see greed immediately. It's just it's a side effect I have.
And I would agree. And my thing here is, why are we just shutting them all down? Why not put it like a cool down process? Where's our transition plan? We have no transition plan. We have no cool down time process. We don't have a way for dispensaries that are currently to be grandfathered in, right? Hey, you need to do these things to get up to code. You need to do these things to get your licensing. And the other thing that I've argued, for the last year is what about the average person, Hannah? Like, let's say you or I. Let's say we had a family member who had cancer, who wanted to smoke but didn't know how to grow. One of us knew how to. Should we be allowed to grow a few, plants in our house? Why not set up that to allow for people like us, users, who just want to do it? You and I can brew our own beer, right? I mean, you and I can actually go out and buy beer brewing kits. But if you and I were to try and sell that would be illegal.
Yeah. It's the same thing. Like, what's the difference between growing a marijuana plant and consuming it in your home and making your own beer or wine, or growing tomatoes and, or fruit or whatever? Like, the difference really is, how far you want the morality police. So this is an area where I call the hypocrisy of the Republican Party coming in, is because they don't want the government coming into my life. Don't tread on me, that libertarian aspect that bleeds into the Republican Party. But this is exactly what they're doing, is they're pushing their morality police into this legislation and say, nope, no, you can't have any of that. And then as soon as it's legalized and they can make money on it, then they're cool with it. So it's just those types of things, like to let one or two guys do it just in your home, your own space. This is your free space. You at least, if you own anything, you own your own body. You can put some things into it that they don't agree with, but that's fine as long as you're not hurting anyone else. I'm guessing you're probably even more into that than me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I definitely feel that. Well, as we wrap the segment up,
hey, the music's playing.
It is. I got the music back.
Man.
As we wrap the segment up, a friend of ours posted this the other day. He says, a friend of mine, a veteran named Byron, took his own life. This man had found cannabis product that helped treat his PTSD. Recently, the dispensary that provided his medicine was raided and shut down. Sadly, this veteran could not safely access his medicine and took his own life. I say, let's stop doing that and figure out how to help people versus our own pocketbooks first. We'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics.
This is Heretic Woman, part of the panel of Holy Crap, the Vlogcast, and you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Do you know where Saskatchewan is? Probably not. It's in Canada. If you do, you might know a city named Regina. In Regina, there's a studio. And in that studio, there are, at least once a month, a bunch of skeptical atheist geeks and goofballs who get together to do a podcast. We are the Brainstorm crew, and we're trying to help spread a bit of reason and critical thinking while still having fun. Never taking things too seriously, but still not accepting everything we're told. We go through different topics, exploring them in depth, and often disagreeing. We try to stick to provable facts, and we never trust in myth. That's why we say we're woo-free since 2013. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, or Spreaker under Brainstorm, or check out our website, brainstormblog.net. I can't promise you'll always agree with us, but I can promise you'll have fun listening to us.
Looking for something new and exciting, or maybe just a change from the old atheist show format? Cellar Door Skeptics podcast provides listeners with hours of enjoyment each week on Spreaker and iTunes. Check us out as we talk politics, religion, science, reviews of books and music, along with the occasional interview just for a twist. Join Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern as they bring fresh content to you. Walk with us through the cellar door as we help you prepare for the revolution. You can find us on Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, and even on Facebook.
Hey, what's up? I'm Steve Hayes.
And I'm Dave Curry.
And we're from Prophetcast.
And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics
on the Fox News Network.
They're not affiliated with Fox.
Everyone's a Fox affiliate.
Now, back to the show.
Oh, welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all so much for joining us for another amazing episode with Tanner
music.
and Hannah. With
music. That was real quiet. It was like silent. It was like, well, do we start talking now, or what do we do? I don't know. That was an interesting. We'll edit it in, so this will make no sense to anyone when we edit our music in. But no, the small technical glitch at the very beginning was a good time, and we got to talking after your spoken word intro.
Yes. So we want to, before we get too far into the next segment, we wanted to thank our sponsors of the show, Alan and Denny, A Dude from a Brit Show, and Dr. Gleb. Thank you all so much for being sponsors of Cellar Door Skeptics. If you would like to become a Patreon, and yes, we know, we are not the most popular show, but if you would still like to support us in any way, shape, or form, please head over to patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics. You can donate as little as $1 an episode, and all it does is help cover the cost of this Spreaker account as well as the cost for the website.
And faulty equipment, because we're being attacked by our own gear here. The mic just about took your face off.
Yeah, the my mic stand that holds this up, I've had that for about 3 years, and technically it's not rated for the mic that I have on it. But it was one that Johnny had bought me, actually I think Johnny bought me that mic stand. I don't know, that's got to be, 3 years ago?
Wait, do we have to pull a Harry Potter moment out of here? He whose name must not be spoken.
I don't care. His name is Johnny. When I was on Atheist Analysis, Johnny bought me a small portion of equipment, and he bought me probably the cheapest mic stand.
He bought you a hard drive. Dude, didn't he?
Yeah, he did buy me a hard drive too.
That one still works.
Yeah.
Backstory on that one.
Yeah, we're not going to give the backstory. But anyway, over the last 3 weeks, my mic stand is not holding my mic up very well. So half the time during the show, I have to readjust my mic, and so I think it's about time I go out and just buy another mic stand. I think I'm going to just do that in the next couple of weeks.
We've also got some news coming for our big 2-year show. We got to pick. We got to figure out which one we're gonna give to. We're gonna do a donation to charity. If anybody has any suggestions, let us know who you think is the best one be for us. We last year we did a drive for a friend of ours with Atheist Nomads, wasn't it?
Yes.
And so that was the big one that we gave to. I think we gave $70, $100 or something like that to those guys. And so we wanted to give some money to a local charity or a national charity. I usually do Foundation Beyond Belief. I'm kind of biased that way. So I have just a PayPal automatic deduct on that. And they've been doing a lot of great stuff with the Hurricane Harvey mess. That Atheist Manifesto did a foundation drive for them. So that's also in our eyes. But if anybody has a suggestion, any really cool charities that are really trustworthy, people you think would be great, let us know, and maybe we can pick them as our go-to for their year anniversary.
Yes, and because that's a big thing for us. I mean, our goal is not to make money off this, but just to be able to give back to the community. And it's funny, we're going to be on an interview. We were interviewed last week for an upcoming show called Inciting Incident. With Marissa McCool, and I put in the show notes that this is our hobby horse, and you'll hear they'll make fun of me. Trust me, I'll get made fun of for saying that. And so you have to check out that episode because they actually they actually talk to us a little bit about what we do with the show, kind of the creativity behind it, the little that there is, and we get to poke fun of ourselves. But the one big thing was a hobby horse, right? Like they're like, what's a hobby horse? Well, nobody would use that, but that's what this is to us. I mean, this is we consider this a job as much as it is to everybody else. We hope people listening enjoy what they're hearing. We hope that they want to support us, but we don't want to be supported because we want to become rich off this, right? We don't. We have other jobs.
This is an altruistic thing that we both want to do. This is what we think as far as our time is concerned is what we're able to give. You've got a whole brood of tiny humans suckling off of your wallet, and that's your donation to society, except from dealing with this. And I work so much. I fund all of my taxes into the Michigan state and into the nation as far as my small business tax is concerned. I don't have a lot of. I really simply cannot get out to do a lot of live action protesting and activism. And so this here is something that I'm able to do, and I would love for it through via donations or whatever, be able to be a secondhand way for us to give back to a charity or a community that does need anything that we can do. And we get to be idiots on the internet for a little bit every Tuesday night. I think everybody wins a little bit there.
Yeah, and so I think what we'll do is we'll either post a poll on our website or we'll post a poll on Facebook. We don't know which it is yet.
We can do the polls on Twitter too, so maybe we'll do something there.
So we'll post a couple of polls this week. That's Hannah's actual homework, since he never contributes to the show other than his voice. Good. And
he's right. I've been terrible lately.
And what we'll do is it'll give everybody a chance to vote. So hopefully everybody enjoys what we do, and let us know what charity you think we should be donating the money to this year, because as we promise all Patreon supporters, we donate at least 10%, if not more, of all incoming funds to a charity.
It'll probably be more than 10%. It was last year.
It was more it was more funds than we brought in last year.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the next topic that will not be a charity of ours, that we will definitely not be donating to, is called Big Oil.
Yeah.
And
you don't want to give Rex Tillerson any of your money?
Nope. I don't want to give. I don't actually like giving them any of my money, and I've already been contemplating how I can fix my income settings and my expenditures so I can buy a green vehicle so I don't have to give them any more money. And it's kind of funny because I worked on a project at work with an Indian gentleman, and him and I were talking about environmentalism and how it's actually extremely important in his life, and he respects the environment, and it's all part of his whole belief system. And we were talking about he owns a hybrid, and I said, well, why don't you own a full-out electric car? And he says, just right now they're not economical. He says, but for the little amount of driving that I do, and he lives very close to work, his hybrid works. He says it literally charges. He says, I go on a half-hour drive on my lunch hour just to charge my car, and it charges while it's driving. And he says his gas tank, guess how big his gas tank is?
Like 10 gallons, 5 gallons?
No, not even that. 7 to 8 gallons. That's how small his gas tank is. And he says he literally has probably spent, I don't know, maybe $100 on gas in 6 months.
Well, you know how a hybrid system works, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's basically that the gasoline motor on there is just a generator running in the trunk or in the front, depending on where they put it or whatever. But like the gasoline motor isn't actually doing any of the actual driving. So what they're doing is just a fully electric drive system on most of these hybrids, if not all of them. I've never heard of one that had a way to switch on and off in the drive system to make the gas-powered engine drive the car. It's always the electric drive motors and the electric system, and the gas power is simply a generator recharging the electric system or directly running the electric system, like a 1-to-1, 30 volts out, 30 volts in type situation. But like the hybrids themselves, they're awesome units, and if you can afford them, because there is a bit of a premium for a hybrid still, unfortunately, and there's an exasperating premium on a full electric. Like the Chevrolet Volt, what I would consider would be my entry vehicle into electric market, is still $38,000, and it's a 2-person sedan. It's a small car, and it's frustrating because like Tesla with the Model S, the Model E, I think it is that's the one that's going to be a $30,000 entry car, and still $30,000 is really expensive for a car. Like I've been saying for years, the first company to get an electric car with 2.5 to 300 miles on its round trip abilities into the sub $20,000 market will own the small car market. But that's what he was talking about. He said that it's not economical. Basically, he's saying that the initial investment for the expensive car takes 4 or 5 years to pay off on the gas savings. So like you pay a huge upfront cost, and then after a certain period of time, you're saving money, but it's not worth it yet.
Yes. And I agree with you. And, I do understand that it is a little bit of a privileged position, right? That some of us will be able to afford that, not everybody else can.
That's early tech, though. Tech is always like that.
And I'm not going to deny it. But for me, on my side, the goal is to get out of paying the gas station money, to get out of paying, and ruining the environment. And that's the whole point of going to this article, because there was an article that we found called IOP Science. Essentially, it's a scientific journal that published an article by Jeffrey Serperin and Naomi Oreskes.
Close enough.
And anyway, so they published this journal about, essentially it's about how Big Oil or ExxonMobil has been misleading the public. And the study reveals a whole bunch of dirty laundry that that claim science or climate change is not real.
The study is from the Department of History of Science at Harvard University too.
Yes.
So this isn't like some small who knows what the heck they are university. This is a prestigious place, and this is their postdoctoral work. So this is the kind of stuff, once you get your doctorate, then you have to go into a postdoctoral university where you work on a project, and this is the big one that these people went into. And we're talking MIT levels as well. So
yeah, and that's okay. So that's why I was drawn to this, and it's not just because I understand that climate change is a real thing. It's not because I understand or want to tear apart big oil companies, because I don't think they're doing enough. It's because I want to help educate the public as much as I can. And I found this article very interesting, because they talk about what big oil does behind the front doors, internally, and what it does publicly. And that's the big thing here. And that's the biggest accusation. And I won't give too much away because it's kind of a big reveal, right? But so...
Dun, 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 dun.
So what happened is I decided to go find ExxonMobil's website, right? And reviewed what if they even bothered to address the claims. So here is what ExxonMobil says about
its past
these people
in climate change?
Well, it's their rebuttal to the scientific article. So the first,
this is Exxon's direct rebuttal to that article from Harvard.
Yep.
Okay.
You ready? It's super long. ExxonMobil acknowledges the risk of climate change is clear and warrants action.
Okay.
The study was paid for, written, and published by activists leading a 5-year campaign against this company. It's inaccurate. It's preposterous.
Okay.
Our statements have been consistent with our understanding of climate change. Rather than pursuing solutions to address the risk of climate change, these activists, along with trial lawyers, have acknowledged a goal of extracting money from our shareholders and attacking the company's reputation. Ooh. They have admitted their earlier allegations that the company hid its climate science research were wrong, and have now shifted to a new thesis in their campaign against the company. ExxonMobil is focused on providing the energy the world needs and developing solutions to address the risk of climate change by reducing our emissions helping consumers reduce their emissions and conducting research into new low-emission technologies. We support the Paris Climate Agreement, which Trump doesn't, and are members of the Climate Leadership Council, which advocates for a revenue-neutral carbon tax.
Well, that looks great on paper.
It does. And so, the first thing that shocks me, I guess, a little bit, I guess it doesn't shock me, but the first thing I want to look at is, are these really activists, right, that are campaigning? And so I did a little research. So Jeffrey is a postdoctoral fellow working with Professor Naomi, and I'm not going to pronounce her last name, in the Department of History of Science at Harvard University. He is also a postdoctoral associate with Professor Jessica Tranick at the Institute for Data Systems and Society at MIT. He has a PhD in material science and engineering at MIT. Right? That's pretty good. They also go on for 3 more sentences about what he's done in his undergraduate, his postgraduate, all sorts of different things, right? So essentially, yes, he is not a shill for climate change. He is actually a true scientist that has all sorts of degrees and has actually worked towards changing carbon emissions of cars against, basically climate change mitigation that a lot of companies like to do.
Yeah, I will say that he has gotten his degrees. His degrees specifically don't give any kind of inclination directly as to his political leanings or whatever. But he's considered qualified to make these types of, arguments for, against, and an analysis of what ExxonMobil has done. Now, his conclusions may be a little bit, his own personal thing, but what he's got to do is he has to back it up with evidence. And so ExxonMobil is basically saying that these people that have Naomi Oreskes and the other gentleman, they were basically activists that are going out of their way to attack the company and, slander, libel, all that kind of stuff. Well,
I'm going to interrupt you a minute. You know what this feels like? Didn't we just talk about somebody trying to sue somebody else because they felt personally attacked?
Yeah, that happens all the time.
Yeah, wasn't it some really rich dude?
Yeah,
that made a lot of money. And and he didn't want to be. Oh, that was right. He didn't want John Oliver, another rich guy, to attack him.
Yeah,
John Oliver's a rich guy. To attack him about the coal industry.
Yeah.
So I feel personally, and this is just my feelings, and maybe because I've been seeing a therapist lately, maybe that's why I say I feel more often. But I almost kind of feel like if you look at the two, in conjunction together, what do we see in common here? Ultra-rich organizations that have lots to lose financially are now upset that people are attacking their livelihood.
Oh, well, these major corporations have always dealt with these kinds of problems. They've always essentially been called out for doing things illegally, and then once they have no other legal action left, they cannot deny it any longer, then they finally acknowledge and they change. And so that's one of the things about having regulatory forces in the government. If you think about lead in gasoline, what did it take? It took one guy destroying his career, and then a large group of people finally agreeing with his science and making changes, and then the federal government regulating and forcing lead to be removed from the fuels. This is the same kind of thing that's happening, albeit in a slower pace, I think. I didn't live through the lead stuff, but ExxonMobil and all these major energy corporations, it's in their best benefit to maintain the status quo, to keep that. These people are challenging that. If they're doing so out of their own personal agendas on the company, that is something that we can acknowledge. But I will also say that even if you have a personal agenda against a billion dollar company that gets over $50 billion in subsidies from the U.S. government, which is my major issue with the big oil, is that's okay, because this is kind of sort of for the overall good. ExxonMobil, as much as they are pro climate change and carbon neutral tax, like they say, I guarantee they're fighting a carbon neutral tax. If you said, Exxon, we're going to put a carbon neutral tax on you tomorrow, that company would not support it. I guarantee it. And so they will be lovely and say that they support all of these things. But if you're going to throw it onto them the next day, then, that's too much. We can't expect us to change this quickly, because it will cut their bottom dollar. So these guys in the New York Times piece and the authors here, they're basically attacking directly that. And so where are they going with their attacks?
Well, That's a good question, Hannah. So essentially what they said is that ExxonMobil, is that there's a lot of ExxonMobil former and current employees who filed a lawsuit. They had not identified in the New York Times article whether they were the ones part of that or not, right?
Yeah.
But they have acknowledged that there is a lawsuit about ExxonMobil making false and misleading statements about financial risk of climate change. Other shareholders of ExxonMobil are bringing similar charges against the company. Last month, 3 California communities sued 37 oil, coal, and gas companies, including ExxonMobil, for contributing to sea level rise while engaging in a coordinated multi-front effort to conceal and deny their own knowledge of these threats.
So essentially, they're saying that they did the science. They saw, hey, the sea levels are rising, because I believe it's been like 6 to 8 inches in the last 50 years or 100 years. And so Exxon said, hey, we're seeing this. But they didn't just come out and say, holy crap, everyone, this is a big deal. They said, yep, we understand that, and we're going to make small changes, but we're not going to broadcast this to the world.
Yes, and so that's what they're accusing of. They're saying, hey, we want to analyze internal memos as much as we can, internal publications, advertising publications, and look at, because in all fairness, ExxonMobil did contribute to scientific research,
now,
right?
I have a question.
Yes.
Is how much of a private company's information on research should be available for the public? Like a private company is doing research and they get information. Even if they discover something that is dangerous to the world, how much right does the public have to that? So
I don't know. I think you're tangenting here, because if you think it's the same. Okay, hold on. It's the same as any other organization. If they have, because I don't know the answer.
Ethical right?
Yeah. Do they? I don't even care about the ethical right, because we don't live in a society where solely ethics is based. The laws are based solely on ethics. That's not how it works. Solely, they're based typically.
This is
on
not a
free will.
meritocracy. You
can reverse the question, Hannah, and say any science group, whether it's for profit or non-profit, do they have to legally publish their stuff?
Yeah.
And in all fairness, and we'll get to this in a few minutes, though, ExxonMobil has published scientific studies. They have scientific studies. But now they're behind paywalls, but they have published them.
So basically, they published all these studies, but they kind of held back. They didn't give all of it out. So my question is essentially, do they have to give everything out? They are a private corporation, so in my eyes, yes, they should. And the reason they should is because government subsidies. The oil industry is subsidized in the United States. They are given money to be the oil industry. Now, that means that the United States citizenry, all of us, have a little money invested in those companies. So anything that they do, there should be transparency, and we should know what they're doing.
But if the laws do not exist to support your belief set, you cannot require them or morally go against them and say you're an immoral organization unless the government's going to stick up for that. And I know that sounds, a little harsh, Hannah, but in all fairness, if they're not doing it right now, and the government's not saying anybody has to do this, you can't expect them to do it. Can you say they're, not as morally reprehensible as, let's say, I don't know, any other scientist like Sean Carroll or, our friend Abby, who publishes all her stuff? But she does it for profit, too, to some extent. I mean, she gets paid to do that. They're doing it on their side for whatever reason.
Well, that's what I'm saying is that, so essentially, if this is a major corporation that's getting money from the U.S. government, then just by that definition alone, they're getting subsidies, then they should have to publish all of their findings.
Then you have to create a law that says they have to do that.
Well, yeah, I don't think that would be a difficult law to pass for the average people, but that's a difficult law to pass if you allow lobbyists in the government to say, there's no way we would want to do that. Why would we want to be completely transparent? Just like legislation wanting to be transparent, and legislature and everything.
Exactly. And I agree with you, but without the laws, we can't have that. We're going to take a quick commercial break to refresh our drinks. When we come back, we're going to actually get into what the study says, because they have some good information, at least in my opinion. So we'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics right here on the most amazing network ever.
Hello, I'm Miss B. Haven.
I'm Demanda Wright.
And we're
promoting secular feminism. And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Coming to you from Reason Alliance Media, this is PSF, Promoting Secular Feminism. I'm Miss B. Haven. Wait a minute, that was the old show. You're right, Princess Sparklefarts. A new age of PSF is upon us, and it will be so very uterific. So very uterific? Really? Your name is Princess Sparklefarts. You have no room to criticize. Our show will be returning on Galentine's Day 2017, which is February 13th, with a special episode about the Women's March in DC, where we have one of our crew marching. We'll also introduce you to the PSF 2.0 crew, Miss Amthrope, Vegeta George, Mora Abortions, Bella Constrictor, and your old favorite, Miss B. Haven. Tune in on February 13th and every week after on iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher, YouTube, on our Android app available in the Google Play Store, and check out our website for old episodes, new episodes, and the upcoming blog. There's even a post right now about what we can do to support each other and the organizations we love in facing the new regime. I'm Miss B. Haven, keeping the humorous in your uterus.
If you'd like to join the ranks of Patreons and sponsor the show, head over to patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics. For less than a 20-ounce soda or an energy drink each week, you can help sponsor us, the hosts, and our charity of choice. Patreon helps Cellar Door Skeptics create better content, become better activists, and it's going to help you stay healthier by drinking one less soda or one less energy drink each week. Click the link in the notes of the show to sponsor us today, because we bring the discussion with the sources.
Hey, my name is Jeremiah. And this is David from the God Theory Podcast. And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics. Prepare for the revolution.
Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Hannah Sneeze and Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all again for joining us tonight. We're going to pick up the conversation where we left off, because this was an article, and we kind of talk a little bit about it on the Inciting Incident podcast, but we never got into the extreme details of it, and that's why I wanted to actually cover it on this show. So hopefully, they don't find this offensive, because we actually talked about this on the show. But I really wanted to get into detail about this because, we do science segments where we analyze scientific articles all the time, right? And we do this in an effort to, ensure that we can try and maintain our ability to learn new things as best we can.
Well,
we want to share them with everybody because we find them interesting, like bees. We talk about bees like more than you could ever imagine. We might as well call ourselves the Bee Podcast, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, we could, really. Bees are cool. Bees are absolutely awesome. But, this kind of stuff here, this is where you typically hear, a political analysis will talk about the political aspect of this, but they won't talk about who's doing the scientific papers. They won't talk about what their findings were in those papers, and then they won't go a back and forth directly with what each people say about the science itself. They'll be like, well, Exxon says no, and these people say yes. And moving on to Tucker Carlson, and he's yelling at a pastor. It's just any of those things, they never really go that in depth. And something like this, it's kind of thick in detail, so you kind of got to put your face right up into it, like you have been the last couple days.
Exactly, and that's kind of why I like this one, and that's kind of why I wanted to do this article. So, what we were talking about earlier is a scientific article that called ExxonMobil out and all their entities for basically providing misleading information about climate change,
or not telling all that they knew, kind of like keeping some stuff in their back pocket.
So here's how they introduced the actual study. They said in 2016, attorney generals of 17 states and territories announced that they are working together on key climate change-related initiatives, such as ongoing and potential investigations into whether ExxonMobil Corporation and other fossil fuel companies may have violated various racketeering, consumer protection, or investor protection statutes through their communication regarding anthropogenic global warming. Good catch. And so what they decided to do is they said, hey, well, let's look at an actual a method, and they say it's called content analysis, which is an empirical method that is relevant to publicly available internal company files that have led to allegations against ExxonMobil, as well as peer-reviewed and non-peer-reviewed publications offered by the company in response to allegations against climate change. So this is not the first time ExxonMobil's been called out for being anti-climate change or oil ruining the environment. I mean, think about it back in, I don't know, was it the early 90s with Al Gore and his, whole crusade? I mean, we talk about all these, things that happen, and Al Gore was just a little over the top for a lot of people, but he had a lot of good science behind what he was talking about.
Al Gore got much, much more into the science as he finished up his vice presidency, but they talk about this as like the op-ed page in the New York Times between 1989 and 2004. And these are paid advertorials. And I'm not really familiar with that. So like an advertisal,
so essentially
editorial.
Yeah, so essentially they wanted to advertise on the New York Times, and
so they paid for an editorial that supported their claims.
Yes,
basically.
And sometimes they wrote it, sometimes they didn't write it. It was people, loosely related to them. Some of them were internalized.
That's like payola. Back in the day, you used to pay money to the record company or the record or radio stations so that they would play your music. So essentially, whoever had the most money had the hit records at the time. Like that's how this is. Like you get when you see an editorial in a newspaper, you think that is an editor that's giving you his personal opinion as an important person in news, and you can buy that. That sounds incredibly unethical.
Yeah, okay, but all right, that's not exactly.
That's
you're over.
I didn't notice that. That was freaky. I'm just having it in like a moment here.
You're over complicating this conversation. They don't even go to that depth level. They're not seeing whether exactly how much is paid, what goes into it. But essentially it would be like if you wanted to promote Cellar Door Skeptics at the New York Times and say, hey, we cover scientific articles. Here's what we've done. Here's where we're researching. Here's where we're demonstrating that we're actually looking at peer-reviewed studies. Oh, and by the way, we don't just, give a high-level opinion of it. We give you the high level and we look at the facts behind it.
And we did not have any episodes where we were completely ripped out of our minds talking about garbage the entire time. Those did not happen. That is completely irrelevant to the conversation. Like that's kind of what it is. It's like they're not saying anything about the bad stuff they found. They're just talking about all the good stuff. That confirmation bias thing.
A little bit, yeah. So they look at those type of documents. They also analyze another 187 documents generated between 1977 and 2014. And each document gets coded and characterized as a position of climate change as real, human cause, serious, solvable, or, incoincidentally is, nothing, like is part of the skepticism or the denial tree of climate change. They also found as early as 1970 that ExxonMobil and its predecessors, Exxon and Mobil, before I guess they merged to be a global conglomerate, not only knew about emerging climate science, but also contribute to its research. So they specifically said that they have written scientific or co-authored scientific research reports, articles by different employees acknowledging that global warming and climate change are a real and serious threat. They also noted it could be addressed by reducing fossil fuels, meaning that fossil fuel reserves might one day become stranded assets.
So essentially, they realized that if global climate change was accepted as a regular basis, the entirety of their industry would become null and void as far as a valuable financial asset. That's what that means, a stranded asset.
You just cut to the chase with that.
That's what
they're
they are.
They're not even claiming that though. They're just
it's insinuated. There's just like, if we completely and totally accept climate change, the earlier that we do it, the earlier all of our financial assets, as far as everything we have in Saudi Arabia, everything we have in Russia, everything we have in Alaska, any place that there's oil that is to be extracted and used, that becomes a useless commodity at that point. And so the earlier they accept it, the faster their finance and their power and their global strength weans. And so they just resisted it as long as they could. It's like I was talking about earlier. Until you force them to do something, they'll just be like, I didn't know, I don't know anything, and then you force them through regulation to make a change, and then that's where they'll go. That's a slow change in corporate resistance to change. This is a direct example of.
So what they did is they have 187 documents, 32 internal documents, 53 articles labeled peer-reviewed publications by ExxonMobil, 48 documents labeled additional publications by ExxonMobil, 36 advertisements basically related to climate change in the New York Times, and 18 other publicly available communications, mostly non-peer-reviewed materials, basically part of ExxonMobil's research. Those are the majority of what they actually looked at.
So that's what the scientific paper says.
Yes, that's what it's actually.
This is all of our data. This is what we're using to say that Exxon knew about climate change way before they accepted it.
Yes. So what they did is they posted a timeline, and if you actually go through the article, you can see the timeline. And we're probably not going to have time to get into that whole thing because again, this whole article could be literally a episode and a half worth of material. I mean, there's just that much material in there.
There's scientific notations and information and data in here. I'm seeing all kinds of 10s that are minus 13s. Like, there's some numbers in here that you need to sit down and read through.
Yes. So they actually post a timeline of all these articles, and they break it up into different categories. They look at it based on internal documents. They look at it as advertisement type documents. They break them all down. They put them all together, and they extract them all. They kind of show them on this large timeline that talks about, essentially everything. What I wanted to focus on real quick, though, is the internal documents, right? Because the internal documents also take the acknowledgement stance, right? They take a stance that basically acknowledges there's different positions, whether it's positive or negative, they're taking a position of acknowledgement. So it's not like you and I saying, hey, there's a such thing as climate change. And people are like, well, Hannah, do you believe in climate change? And you're like, I'm just going to say there's a such thing as climate change, and there's research into it. That's basically a non-acknowledgement stance. Other than you're acknowledging climate, there's something to do with climate change that exists in the infosphere. If you were to come on and all of a sudden say, I think climate change is awful, and ExxonMobil is alluding to it, and they are creating it, you're now taking a position. You're acknowledging a position. If you said the exact opposite and said, no, ExxonMobil never did anything wrong, because I know that's how you truly feel, Hannah, and then you're still acknowledging some sort of a stance. So what they do is they show that 63% of the articles take a position, 80% acknowledge, with most of the rest expressing reasonable doubt. Unlike other documents, however, our characterization of internal documents shifts dramatically if we remove different filters for reasonable doubt from our analysis. And again, they have a whole paragraph and a half on reasonable doubt, and we're not going to get into that specifically tonight. They then say that 61% of the article's internal documents have a mixed position, with the remainder split between acknowledge and doubt. So 17% acknowledge, 22% don't or doubt it, right? And 61% say, hey, we believe both sides of the coin. To me, it almost kind of feels like a Donald Trump moment there, where they're like, hey, it's everybody that's creating the violence, when the majority of us are like, no, Nazis are horrible pieces of crap. We really should not endorse them. And do you not understand that you can just say Nazis and the alt-right are kind of the same thing now? Do you not understand that, Trump? And that's kind of what that feels like and that was the big part of this whole scientific, examination, right, Hannah? The whole point of that is to say, hey, what are they saying internally? What are they saying externally? And where are they going with this? Because how can they have a 61% mixed position, right, when the science has been leading since the late to mid 90s, saying climate change exists? Here's actual scientific facts that demonstrate it. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean we shouldn't acknowledge it.
Well, the internal documents acknowledging essentially 80%, 63 to 80% taking the position that they adopt, acknowledging that it exists, with the rest expressing reasonable doubt. Like, those are very specific terms. So, like, acknowledging, so that isn't saying that, yes, 100%, but yes, there's good evidence to show that this is true. And this is where the really large percentage of the global scientific community comes in, as far as acknowledging that humans contribute to climate change. And that is the big thing. Like, the number of scientists saying humans are completely and totally the absolute, without a question, reason that climate change exists isn't quite as large, but it's still very large. But just acknowledging that climate change exists and it is a danger to humanity is a vast majority of the scientific community. And that is kind of what the internal documents at Exxon are saying, is that they are in basically in agreement with the scientific consensus. This is early on versus from what we've all been told, the scientific community started to completely and totally conclusively agree. With the conclusion, it's very simple in what they basically describe. The available documents show a discrepancy between what Exxon scientists and executives discussed about climate change. I mean, that is the big thing. It's like, what did the executives and the scientists discuss, and how did they think about this? And okay, so the majority accepted that climate change is a real thing. It's something that exists, and we need to do something about it. And then they kind of held back and presented to the general public different information. And when it comes to, what does the private company have to give to the general public, and what is required and federally required and stuff, those are where the laws and all this stuff come in. But as far as science is concerned, if you do the research, you need to publish all of your findings. You can't cherry pick what you get, and that is where the problem comes in. The ExxonMobil scientists,
I'm going to disagree with you. Hold on, I'm going to disagree with you on that. I disagree with you, and actually, I think the article does not, and the peer review study does not say that. The peer-reviewed study says this. They say there's 3 different categories, Hannah, and the one is that they misled the public, right? And that goes into what we talked about at the beginning, right? The racketeering. By not
publishing all of their info.
They have published it, but they were behind paywalls. The difference is what they paid to advertise was different, and that's where I disagree with you in that they were cherry-picking it. They weren't cherry-picking it. They just weren't acknowledging or embracing the scientific study and saying, hey, we're going to be the front leading cause of the change in science. The problem is that the majority of us don't get access to scientifically reviewed papers unless we read them or unless we pay for them or know somebody that has access, right? Like my sister still has access based on the college classes she's taking. I get access to certain things that not everybody else gets access to, only because she can share certain articles with me and give me ability to log in, whether that's right or wrong or indifferent.
So
she does.
What you're saying, though, is like Exxon published all of their findings 100%,
yes,
and then didn't, I guess, advertise all of it.
Yes, so what would happen is essentially, they were misleading non-scientific audiences about climate change.
So they published the truth, and then they advertised only the good parts that benefited them.
Well, they didn't advertise. I wouldn't call them the good parts. I disagree with your wording. They published what they felt they wanted the public to know. So it would be like if big government owned all of the internet, right? And all of a sudden they came to your house and like, hey, we can't give you any faster internet unless you give us $300 more a month because we really need it to support our infrastructure. And then all of a sudden somebody leaks a study, through WikiLeaks that says, hey, the government only needs $10 of your actual income, a year to do the infrastructure. The rest of that money is going into their pockets to spend on other things, for other things. So you're being lied to. So that's what ExxonMobil, according to the study, is doing, is essentially
false
they're saying
advertising.
Yes. Okay. They're essentially saying, hey, we're going to mislead you. So first, the actual review shows that there is a discrepancy between what different document categories say, and particularly what they emphasize as real human cause, serious, and solvable. The discrepancy grows with the public accessibility of these documents. Second, ExxonMobil in public contributed quietly to the science and loudly raised doubts about climate change. That's what this whole discussion is. This is not actually about who can make money off this. What do we sue them for? How do we affect the company? And it's kind of funny because, and I guess as a tangent, but ExxonMobil is pissed that people are suing them. But it's like, well, how else are we going to stop you? What else are we going to do? If we don't hit your pocketbooks, take your money and use it to fund climate change research that is going to actually be given to the fucking public, how else are we going to do this? And that's what this whole thing is about. Third, their advertorials, or their ads, basically include several instances of explicit factual misrepresentation. So that goes kind of back to what you were originally saying, Hannah, with the misleading of the public. I just don't. The way you were wording it was
basically
was wrong.
what I was saying is that their scientific papers that they were only putting out some of it. So basically, they were releasing all of their findings, and then we'd just be like, "Well, we're not going to tell anybody about what we just found.
We want
except we'll advertise for this stuff. It says it's uncertain. We're not certain. We've got these things that are like, meh." And so that's basically what they're saying. Is they overwhelmingly emphasize the uncertainty in the New York Times. Basically, what they were saying there. So just. Whenever we're like, well, we're not sure it's human driven. And so that is what we hear. Still, we hear to this day is like, oh, climate change is real. The climates have always changed, but we don't believe it's humans that are influencing it. You know, that's moving the goalposts in most cases when I look at that analysis. And it seems like that's what Exxon was doing here.
Yes, and they've done it repeatedly. They give you 4 examples just in the discussion about that. Essentially, like one of them where they basically said the argument for aerosol particulars compensate for, and what?
The particulates,
whatever. For, and may even overwhelm fossil fuel greenhouse gases. They aren't very convinced by that. That's what they said in their public statement. But if you look at the findings actually contradict that. And the findings essentially say, no, here's your percentage difference, and oh, by the way, this is harming it more. But because what they did is they twisted the data and said, well, if we use 10 aerosols to, let's say, 1,000 gallons of oil is technically more harmful than aerosols, even though in reality, if you took them and compared them on equal stands, aerosols would be more harmful than oil.
Yeah, they're way more. If you look at like hairsprays and you look at all that kind of stuff now, it's completely different than it was early in like the early 90s and late 80s when that stuff had a lot of. You used to hear about it. It's like, don't use hairsprays and stuff. The aerosols are really bad for the atmosphere. They changed the way a lot of that works. There's still a CO2 base and stuff now. It's not good, but you'll see a lot more of like the pump spray stuff. Those are things where the market changed based on pressure from these kind of advertising campaigns where people were told the truth. And so that's a good example. And Al Gore, as you talked about earlier, with his inconvenient truth, and then the sequel. I don't know what the sequel is called. It's like a sequel to an inconvenient truth. It has another name. It's a fairly ingenious name, but I haven't seen it yet. But he's basically going through all of this stuff that he talked about in that one, and it's directly in contradiction to what ExxonMobil has been releasing for years. And so this is good to see. Hopefully this kind of stuff will force them to change, and the courts won't hold up any kind of resistance that ExxonMobil is giving.
Exactly. They conclude with this: available documents show a discrepancy between what ExxonMobil scientists and executives discussed about climate change privately and in academic circles and what it presented to the public. The company's peer-reviewed, non-peer-reviewed, and internal communications consistently tracked evolving climate change, but they didn't bother to acknowledge it and contradicted themselves in public all the time. We'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics talking about Trump's abomination of a pardon here in the next few minutes. We'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics.
Hey, this is Keith.
And this is Jen, and we're from Not Another Atheist Podcast.
You're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Join the revolution.
Hi, my name's Callie.
And I'm Ari.
If you're like most of us, you're very concerned about the gay agenda's plans for world domination.
Are you tired of seeing glitter all over every damn thing?
Do you hate rainbows as much as any other red-blooded American?
Then we have the answer for all your baseless fears and unjustified paranoia.
Presented exclusively on Secular Media Network, the Gaytheist Manifesto is your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement.
You can find us on Spreaker, iTunes, and at gaytheistmanifesto.secularmediagroup.com.
If you're not ready to get in line for your mandatory gay marriage and you're terrified of short-haired women in pantsuits, come have a listen and get up to date on their plans. You'll be glad you did.
Considering how you want to help Cellar Door Skeptics, head over to iTunes or your favorite podcast app and give us a rating, because every rating helps push us in front of new listeners. And since our main goal here at Cellar Door Skeptics is to provide the most accurate information possible, We hope that more ratings will mean that more people get to hear the topics that we're presenting. We don't insist that we get a 5-star rating, but Hannah's favorite number is 5, and the more gold stars he gets, the more special he's gonna feel. So what do you say? Head on over to iTunes or Google Play, give us a rating, and help engage with Cellar Door Skeptics today.
Hey, my name is Jeremiah. And this is David from the God Theory Podcast. And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics. Prepare for the revolution.
And now, back to Cellar Door Skeptics with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna. The show with the sources. Haha! Welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all so much for sticking through another amazing shot number 6 episode. And we've had a pretty good run, you know. I mean, last week, you know, we were a little bit more reserved, you know, didn't quite go into an extreme aggressiveness other than, you know, we bashed Trump. You know, we had a good scientific article.
It was pretty thermodynamic, nerdy. Nerdy. Yeah.
This one's a little bit emotionally charged. You know, I'll admit there's some emotion on the part of the, you know, medical marijuana thing. There's extreme emotion against big oil because I just and you know, and now
this one's not going to go easy.
No,
there's no
not.
way this one's going to go easy. But I think on the surface of it, we both pretty much hate the entirety of this decision.
Oh yes. Oh yeah, you have
just
no
completely
clue.
Comfortably. Just like, this is just ugly. Well, Arpaio himself, we've never liked, regardless. Anyways, but
no, I mean, this guy Joe Arpaio. I'm going to call Arpaio because I like to butcher
weird
people's
thing,
names.
Right out of the gate to start for Joe Arpaio. The one thing I learned about him today is that in his earliest things that he did as sheriff, he would catch people who had skipped out on child support, and he would just be like, nope, you haven't paid child support. He'd take you into the police station, and your bail was set at what you owed. And so if you owed $1,000 in bail, or $1,000 in child support, your bail was set at $1,000. You pay that, and you get out and go through the court process, whatever. And so, like, he started off as just like family man, take care of the business, take care of people, you know. The children are the most important people that build this up to, and it kind of mutated in this weird totalitarian thing that obviously I'm assuming you're planning on talking about here.
Yeah, and that's actually, you know, okay, because I've had to hear it from both sides. On both sides have I had to hear about whether this was a good decision or not.
On many sides.
Yeah, the many sides. The many sides of Joe Arpaio. Because I say awesome words, but you know, I've had to hear about it on both sides because, you know, again, I don't restrict my news feed to non-conservatives. I haven't ousted a bunch of Nazis. I haven't ousted a bunch of white supremacists.
I don't block.
I've blocked, but I haven't gone out of my way. You know, I've allowed the conversation to happen because some of me wants to know certain things, and while there are some atrocities to things I've seen that I have had to block for the most part, I'd rather than just, you know, allow to be able to be seen. I don't acknowledge their shit. I address it when I see it. John Mosman, for example, I address his stuff all the time. But, you know, outside of that, you know, I like to see that counter argument because I want to know, hey, am I wrong? Could I take a step back and look at this, you know, in a different light? And that's the big thing here. I have not seen a good argument
to support Sheriff Arpaio.
Yes. Yeah. Outside, you know, I mean, there's no good argument that I can find that supports this.
The biggest argument that I have seen is that he was simply enforcing the boundary rules, the laws of the land, but it was kind of like the stop and frisk in New York. It's essentially, he said, if you're a brown person in Arizona, they're just going to check for your papers. Papers, please. Nazi Germany, right? Papers, please. And so that was the whole thing, is that he was essentially saying, if you are a Latin American traveling in Arizona, you're just going to get asked for your papers. And without any kind of justifiable, probable cause or whatever, that's kind of pushing it. And then obviously there were all kinds of problems as far as actually detaining people who couldn't produce paperwork and stuff like that. So like Arpaio is a magnet for a lot of the same reasons why, we think of basically licensing laws and some of the things where they require certain types of documentation for voting. The same kind of things in here is like when you get arrested or if someone pulls you over, it's like what can society, what can cops require, and how can they detain you, and what's considered a violation of your basic inalienable human rights.
But here's the problem, though, and I agree with you, Hannah. Like, I agree with you 100%. Here's the problem: is that he was told to stop.
Yes,
by federal judges,
Supreme Court.
Yeah,
the Supreme, not just a regular court, like the top one.
Yes. And that's the problem I have here is like people are saying stop doing this. He continues to do it. They say we're gonna get you. It's not gonna be a fine. Do you understand? You're gonna be under federal investigation. And all of a sudden he continues to do it. And now we have a president that says, "Hey, I got the power to pardon anyone I want. I can do whatever I want. I'm fucking Trump. I can do whatever the hell I want, anytime I want, all day long, and you can't stop me." Well, in this case, he's right. He can pardon people. And in all fairness, there's an article we linked to. He's not the president to pardon somebody the earliest. My opinion, he's the most atrocious pardoning. But he's not the first president to pardon somebody in under, I don't know what, 300 days, right? Well, it's not him.
What was the podcast that Andrew Torres is part of that we talked to him about?
Opening Arguments.
Opening Arguments. That one as well talks a lot about constitutional law, but there's also a podcast on NPR called Con Law, Trump Con Law, and it's basically Trump constitutional law, and this is one of the things they talk about. They talk about presidential pardons and what's allowed, what's not allowed, and really how they don't absolutely know exactly what is allowed because nobody has pushed it or been as untraditional as this current president is. So there's a lot of stuff that's in uncharted territory as far as legality and, whether or not it's constitutional, whether or not Trump is doing these things. And so there's some pretty cool stuff. So I just recommend checking that out. They don't specifically talk about Arpaio. They talk about Trump pardoning people that are connected to him for this the Russia investigation.
Yeah, and this has nothing to do with the Russia investigation.
It doesn't, but it feels like he's he's kind of testing the waters for how far he can push it.
Yeah, okay, so in you're right. In the NBC News article that we linked to, President Ronald Reagan and Jimmy Carter, for example, issued their first pardons within the first 100 days, 56 and 82 respectively. George H.W. Bush used the pardon power after 206 days in office. So Trump is just shy of that at 216. So he's not the earliest one, right? Now, the difference though, and this is kind of the bigger question, like you had just said, is what is he pardoning? This isn't a specific policy pardon. It's more of a stunt pardon. And this is a gentleman named Ruckman Jr., a political scientist who studies the pardon power and provides the essential historic data. And they got interviewed by MSNBC, and that's exactly what he's saying. He says, all it does is smear the reputation of pardon power, feed misconception that the pardon is for celebrities. And in all fairness, this dude gained some celebrity hype during the Trump campaign. He carried some of that because of the fact that, he was supporting Trump, A,
He's
and
an early
B,
adopter of Trump support.
And he was aggressively going after the border control, which is one of the main platforms Trump ran on in his campaign.
Okay, well, a quick adjustment to what I had said earlier. Your silence made me stop and think. It wasn't the Supreme Court. It was a U.S. District Court Judge Susan Bolton's ruling that blocked the most controversial sections of Arizona's immigration law. So Arizona's legislature came out and said that you can just stop and frisk any brown person driving through their state, and Arpaio was holding that up. The U.S. District Court Judge Susan Bolton, she said that it was unconstitutional, and she blocked most of the controversial sections. Arpaio said, no, I'm going to keep going. You're my judge, but I don't care. Do what you want. And so this is what he was convicted of, is essentially ignoring the judge's rule someone, his superior, as far as the judicial branch is concerned. And that is what this whole thing is. The judge ordered them stopped, and Arpaio ignored those orders.
Yeah, exactly. And so another article that I think we should talk about that I feel is relevant is because, it's not just, this is not the first time, Hannah, that he's made headlines.
No.
And we're not talking,
he's been
say, the last year.
The entirety of his career.
Yeah. So, for example, the Times first mentioned this gentleman in 94, 2 years after he became the sheriff, about coffee, right? And you go, okay, well, what's controversial about coffee?
Coffee?
No. He had nixed cigarettes and sex magazines in prison, right? But he also got rid of coffee in order to cut costs and he claimed it was to make sure inmates couldn't use it as a hot drink as a weapon, right?
Yeah. Well,
holy crap.
One of the things that he talked that I had heard about him as far as his older controversy, that the family law thing where the bail was set to what you owed for child support, was also that he took any kind of amenities from people who were in jail. You don't get anything nice when you're in jail. It is, barren. It's sterile. It's, no magazines. He said nudie magazines. No nudie magazines. No TV. No coffee. Just misery. Just you, yourself, in misery. And that was something that really got a lot of attention for his, he brought chain gangs back. That was a big deal. I don't know if you remember that. I do.
Yes.
So these types of things, like bring that old school, heavy-handed rule of law. That was the Arpaio way.
Yes. Yes, and that's actually that's the first time I ever heard about him, was because he forced people to wear pink underwear and pink shirts and all these different things inside of the work camps, in the prisons. And this is back when we were in high school, for Christ's sake.
Psychological warfare. Yeah, no, I remember this from high school.
And that was one of I actually, ironically enough, and this is kind of why this is a little personal for me, is because I actually wrote an article against that in high school. Like, I actually said, why are we trying to humiliate people by wearing pink? That seems stupid. But at the time I was like, why are we trying to humiliate inmates just because they're in prison? That's not going to change their effect. It seems like...
It'd make them more mad and more likely to be pissed off.
But it just seems like it's kind of like you catch the kid, who's half your size stealing from you. You take your money back, and then to teach him a lesson, you strike him across the back. And it almost feels like the pink underwear, the pink, shirts, those things is a second strike against them to say, hey, look, I'm now in power. Society supports me. Guess what? I could do what I want to you, and I'm going to insult you and make you feel marginalized because I can, and it's all in an effort to try and get you to not come back to prison. But what it doesn't fucking address, and I guess I have to turn an explicit tag on now. What it doesn't fucking address is what pisses me off about the fucking prison systems, is the fact that there is literally no actual concept inside of these fucking illogical people like Arpaio to understand that we're imprisoning people at an illogical rate for stupid crimes, and all you're doing is enforcing bullshit laws that support your agenda and your bias. And in the long run of things, Mr. Arpaio, that you have done absolutely nothing other than continue to marginalize society to your beneficial gain, such as, you've been elected how many fucking times? After you retired, you got brought back.
All I can say is there's no way anybody could insult the guy's name as much as you honestly can't say his name. It's beautiful. Like, you can just say, okay, every time you say Sheriff Arpaio's name, you have to say it wrong. And like, nobody
I don't do it on purpose.
It's perfect. It's beautiful. He deserves every bit of mispronunciation you give him. No, I completely, totally agree. He is basically driving forward the whole idea that becoming a professional criminal is the direct result of the U.S. prison system. So essentially what we do is we take someone who gets arrested for some small, relatively non-violent infraction, and we turn them into a violent offender. And this kind of heavy-handed rule of law, like I mentioned earlier, does that. You ridicule, you dehumanize, you just essentially make someone miserable, and you take away everything but their animal instincts, and then release them back into the wild. There's no benefit here. The idea of prison is supposed to be some kind of reform, some kind of help to get you to realize your mistakes and to change the way you are, not to reinforce that you are considered lesser and to make you more animalistic than you are. But these types of things, these chain gangs, these old school ways of treating prisoners and treating people that do something wrong, eye for an eye, a hand for a hand, it's proven psychologically that all it does is create hardened, more strengthened criminals. And I mean, it's unfortunate this guy gets as much celebrity as he does because he is just an absolutely terrible person when it comes to his morality and ethics. And Trump is supporting that. And that's the big problem that I have is like, I mean, there's no question that his policing is bad. But when it comes to just the morality of what's happening here, when it comes to what he's doing to people that are in this country and they're trying to make things meet, I would bet that the people that, are caught crossing the borders are more sincere, and I've said this multiple times, are more willing to be American than a lot of people that are here. They would be, if you gave them citizenship, they would vote in every election. They would be full-on taxpayers, totally and completely involved in the political system. Like, there's no jadedness there. And it's like, it's unfortunate that this guy is getting as much attention he is, and it was just so successful.
Exactly. And the thing here, and we'll get to Trump's thing here before we close in a minute, but the big thing here is the judges specifically said, you are mocking and defiling our orders. Do you not understand that? Do you not understand that you are going to be prosecuted for criminal intent? Stop. And in the end, he says, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. Bring it on. Yes, I'm going to continue to do it. I'm 90 fucking years old. What are you going to do? He was convicted in July, and his sentencing was scheduled for October. He has not technically even been sentenced yet. And that was another thing that I found very disturbing about this, is that a lot of the people that have been pardoned after they've been sentenced. They've served some time. This guy got to serve 0 time. He got to sit in his McMansion, and he got to sit there and wait for somebody to come around and pardon him. Yeah. And maybe that's why he supported Trump so heavily, or maybe he just really believed in Trump. I don't know. It's all supposition. I don't care. I don't care why he supported Trump. All I can tell you is he lost his sheriff's seat. He's been convicted officially. He was under federal investigation, and now we have a federal authority, specifically, undermine the judicial system.
And that's, I mean, we saw this from a lot of Republicans. This is crazy. John McCain, who has been under much ire and then under much support or given much support, he's been back and forth. He has always been a relatively moderate Republican centrist. I mean, he's like the Republican version of Hillary Clinton. Like, he's right in the middle, and he has weird tendencies to go both directions. But, I mean, he said, and it came out that he said that Trump is undermining the rule of law, and he says that he loves to support it so much. I mean, this is a great example of Republicans, and there are multiples that come out and say, you know what, this is just kind of messed up. And so Republicans are coming out and saying, no. And then, obviously, Democrats and progressives are saying this is a really bad idea. And so there is some decent legislative response to saying that Trump is overstepping his bounds here. And hopefully there'll be a negative political response.
And I would agree. And think about this, Hannah. How many people did Obama put on, the Judicial Committee, right? How many people did he actually get to nominate?
And to be honest with you, I do not know. There was so much destructionism. I never know who gets what put on nowadays.
So I'm going to say 2 tops. I think it's only 1, personally.
On which committees, though?
The actual federal judges, right? For the judicial
the Supreme
branch.
Court? Or?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I thought it was 2. He did.
So 2. Okay, so he put 2 out of how many? How many people?
I'm trying to think of Sotomayor.
Okay,
there might have been one other, but
you're diluting the point.
Either way, yeah. No.
How many people are on? How many people are on the Supreme Court?
9 people, and it's a Republican.
So we're talking 2 people out of 9 people. Trump has claimed, and this is what really angers me, and this is where I do get very angry here, because Trump is claiming that Obama is specifically going out of his way to undermine him, and all this was, and that he treated him unfairly, and this is where. Yes, Arpaio. God damn it, stop. You're going to make me say it correctly.
Damn it.
But what pisses me off is that he's forcing this onto Obama, saying Obama treated him unfairly, therefore I'm going to pardon him. And I'm like, hold on a second. Obama didn't hire all these judicial staff. He didn't create the whole judicial side of the government. It doesn't work like that, Trump. Do not understand politics, for Christ's sake. You are involved in this, but yet you don't understand politics? How do you not understand this?
Trump doesn't understand politics.
How, though? How do you get elected to the highest seat in the country? Not understand this.
I know he doesn't. He's elected to the highest seat in the country, and he has no idea about. I mean, he really doesn't. Like, if you look at the things that he's done, he does not understand politics. And so this decision is purely either a beneficial decision for him. So he looks at his base and he says, "My base loves Sheriff Arpaio. They love border walls. They love Mexicans getting kicked out of this country. They will love me pardoning this guy." He went to Arizona and he was standing on a podium and said, "I think Arpaio's going to be all right. I think he's going to be just fine." Well, of course he is. And the crowd went nuts when he said that. So he's doing this to charge his base, because he's not going to get a wall built. He might get maybe a few $1 billion in the budget, but I mean, he's not going to get what he said. But his base doesn't care that he said he was going to give him all these things. He said that he's going to remove Obamacare. Failed. He said there's going to be a complete tax overhaul. I don't think it's going to happen. He said there's going to be a wall built. It doesn't look like it. He might get a few $1 billion and add like 170 miles or something, like nothing near what he's been promising. But the base doesn't believe the specifics. They just want him to be dancing around.
Exactly. And he said this: Sheriff Joe is a patriot. Sheriff Joe loves our country. Sheriff Joe protected our borders. And Sheriff Joe was very unfairly treated by the Obama administration, especially right before an election that he would have won. And he was elected many, many times. So I stand by my pardon, and I think the people of Arizona would really know him best, would agree with me. This is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. I don't care if he had 50 years of service to this country where he didn't do illegal things, which I don't believe, but that's what Trump claims. He had 50 years of admirable service to our nation, and yet now he does something very horrible for a bunch of people, for millions of people, and yet we're going to sit here and let him walk? That's like saying, "Hey, Bill Cosby, go ahead and rape women. You can just go walk for free." You know, that's what that is. It's ridiculous. It's a misstatement of authority, and I believe, in my personal opinion, this should lead to the actual instigation on both sides to impeach this orange piece of shit. Thank you very much for listening to Cellar Door Skeptics. We'll be back next week at 9 p.m. Eastern live with another amazing episode. Have a good night, everyone.
Listening to a presentation of Cellar Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker, cellardoorskeptics.com.